So we are Mem Bava and Bays 46b, about 15, 20 lines down. By the part Amr of Meir where the Mishnah told us that when a person gets inked, that the Shechina says it's difficult for me. Now the way it says it is Kaloni Miroshi, that it's not light for me. This death. It's meaning not light, meaning heavy. So it says the Gemara, Mai Mashma, where do you see from the word Kaloni that it means this? Amr Abaye, it's Kimanda Amr Kal Lace. It's not easy. So Kaloni Miroshi is Kal Lace. It's not easy for me. Amr Le Rava Im Kain. Why don't you just speak in the positive? Kavod Alai. It's heavy for me. Why do you say it's not light for me? Say it's heavy for me. Kavod Alai Roshi Kavod Alai Zoim Mi Baile. That's what it should have said. Ela Marava Command Amr Killi Alma. It's like a little bit of a euphemism. Hashem, so to speak, doesn't want to refer to himself, so he says Killi Alma. So it's like the whole world. He's referring instead of referring to himself, he's referring to the whole world, and it's Killi Alma. The whole world is light for me, the whole. But for me, it's really heavy. So he's really referring to himself, but instead of referring to himself, speaking about the world. Says the Gemara, Haimi Baile Legufa. You're learning this out of a pasuk about the person who's Mekal Hashem, who blasphemes God. So maybe you just need that word, Kilas Elokim, to teach you about someone who blasphemes God. And it's not available to interpret about what the Shechina says when somebody gets hanged. So Im Kain Nemakra Mikalel. It should say about the person who is Mekal Hashem. He goes and he blasphemes God. My Kilalas, what's Kilalas? It's an unusual way to write it. So therefore, it teaches you, Kilas tells you that the Shechina says that this is heavy for me, or this is not light for me, or the whole world is light. Really means it's not light, it's just heavy for me. Ve'ema kule lahachi huda asa. So maybe say that the whole pasuk, now that's written in its unusual form, it's only teaching you this and not teaching you about someone who blasphemes Hashem. Imke name kilas. My kilalas should say kilas with one lamed. What's two lameds? Shma mina tarti. You learn both things. You learn about the person who blasphemes God, and you learn about that the Shechina is in pain when a person gets hanged, even a Russia. Okay, so now you're not allowed to keep a person there overnight. You got to bury him right away. Amar Rabbi Yochanan Shimon Shimon Ben Yochai. Minayin lemalin is mezush over Allah velosa. Say, how do I know if I keep somebody overnight? I violated a negative commandment. Hamad Lomar. Chikover tikverenu. You should surely bury him, and if not, then you violated this commandment. Mikan lemalin es mezush over velosa. Say, from here you know that when you leave a dead person over and not bury him, then you're over this prohibition. Ikida Amri. Some say Amar Rabbi Yochanan Shimon Yochai. Remez likvura min Torah. Where is the hint? Where is the hint to a kvura? Meaning, we know it's biblical. It's not always stated explicitly, so therefore it's called a remez, a hint. Where is that in the Torah? Talmud Lomer ki kavar tikvren. You should surely bury him. Mikan remez likvura min haTorah. Okay, so two versions basically telling you about the importance of burying somebody right away. Amr le Shvur Malka. I think he was the Persian king. Said to Rav Chama. Kvura min haTorah minayin. So the king asked Rav Chama, where in your Torah does it talk about burial, that you have to bury somebody? So ishtik velo amrle velo midi. Rav Chama was silent and he didn't respond to anything. Stayed quiet. Amr of Achab Har Yaakov imser alma biyad detipshay. He doesn't say such nice words about this. He said, I see the world was given over in the hands of the foolish ones. So what do you mean? Tell him where it says in our Torah about burial. What are you keeping quiet? So the Ibayle Lememar ki cover. It says you should bury him. It says the Gemara in a defense of Rav Chama. That wouldn't have been sufficient. Why? Maybe just bury means Dila Avid Le Aaron. Put him into a casket. How do you see from burying that you should put him into the ground? It could be interpreted as just putting him into a casket. So he covered lovely Aaron. The word tikverenu. You should go and put him in, which we know to mean the ground, but lo mashmale. It's not mashma necessarily. It has to be the ground. So that's how we interpret it, but to the king, that might not have sufficed. So he stayed silent. V'neima mid'ikvar tzadiki. Look in the Chumash. It's full of people being buried in the ground. Why are they being buried? Must be it's a mitzvah to bury somebody. Says the Gemara. No, that's just minhaga ba'alma. That's just a general custom. That's what people do. So the world was doing it, so the tzaddikim also got buried. Meaning, any way you can get a way out of this was a reason why he stayed silent for the king. Because I'm guessing, I'm assuming that he didn't want the king to make fun of the Torah. He didn't want the king to ridicule it, or so unless he had an answer that he knew would be sufficient for the other person, he just stayed silent. You don't have to answer this person. So okay, but with the Kavra Kadosh Baruch Hu Moshe, Hashem buried Moshe. What was that for? No, the lo lishtanim minhaga. Maybe you can just interpret it as to mean Hashem also didn't want to change the way of what people were doing, and that's why he buried Moshe. Okay. Now we're going to bring a few different stories in Tanakh, and they're going to come up numerous times. So the first one is Tashma v'saftulo kol yisol v'kavuroso. So this is referring to Avia ben Yeravam. Yeravam was a Rasha, but his son was righteous, Avia. And Achia Hashiloni was the prophet then, and he prophesied that your son is going to get a proper burial. So you see, there's an idea they're going to eulogize and buried. So you see, there's an idea to bury somebody. No, the lo lishanim minhaga. You can always get out of it and say they didn't want to veer off the general way of the world. Then another part of Malachim, which talks about the people of Anatot, the city that told Yirmiyahu to stop prophesizing. We don't want to hear prophecies anymore. And Yirmiyahu didn't care, and he kept prophesizing. And he told them, you people, you're not going to get a eulogy, and you're not going to get buried. So that also, you see, you're not going to get buried because burying is a mitzvah. So maybe no, because you acted so improperly, we're going to change the general way of the world and not give you a burial. But at the end of the day, the king could have responded these responses to anything that Rav Chama would have suggested to him. Therefore, he kept quiet. Okay. Now we're going to have a lot about burial and then about eulogies, and then we'll see what time it is. So, Ibailahu. Now we're asking, Kvura, general burial. Very interesting. Mishum bizyonahu o mishum kaparahu. So, the primary reason for burying somebody, is it because you don't want the relatives to be embarrassed and disgraced that their relative is lying here and not being buried? Is that your main reason for burial? Or the main reason for burial is to actually receive an atonement? Now, they point out that we're going to see later, everyone agrees that when a body goes into the ground, there's a level of atonement. That's not a conversation. The Ramchal in the beginning of his Derech Hashem talks about the purifications that only the land could do to the body, to purify the body, that a person can't do after the sin of Adam Rishon in this world. And even the people that never died, but they still needed, that never sinned, they still needed to have a burial because only certain purification of the body can be done. So everyone agrees that's what's going to happen. But the question here seems to be, what was the main motivation? What was the main impetus for burying somebody? That the relatives shouldn't be disgraced, or that the person themselves, he should receive an atonement. Both are going to be true. At the end of the day, if you don't bury him, they're going to be disgraced, and he'll get it, and he'll not receive an atonement. But it seems like the way at least Tosfos understands it's what's the primary reason, the impetus for the command to bury somebody. And we'll see what the difference is. Says the Gemara, L'may nafka, who cares? Meaning, what's the practical difference between these two nice reasons? The Omar, let's say the guy himself says, Lo ba'ina delikri laho gavra. Before he dies, he says about himself, don't bury me. This is a very important topic nowadays, right? Cremation, right? So lo ba'ina delikri laho gavra. So now, I amris mishum bizyonahu, if it's because the relatives shouldn't be embarrassed and disgraced that their relative is not being buried, so lo kol kamina, you can't decide if someone else should or should not be disgraced. That's not up to you. So therefore, we wouldn't listen to you. Now, the iyamar mishum kaparahu, So if it's for atonement, okay, I mean, you can decide you want to be atoned or not. It might be a poor choice, but your choice. So ha'amar lo bein a kapara. I don't want atonement. My. Now we're going to bring a lot of proofs. It's going to come out undecided, and I think it's a whole discussion in halacha about exactly how we hold. And I have not looked into it sufficiently. Tashma. So now all the things that we just brought earlier that he didn't respond to the Persian king, we're going to be using it now in this conversation. So v'i amris tashma medek for tzadiki. Look, the tzadikim were buried. So now, why were they buried? I amris mishum kapara tzadik le kapara tzrichi. Do tzadikim really need kapara? I mean, they lived the whole righteous life. So maybe that's a proof that really the burial is not for the kapara for atonement, rather for embarrassment, for disgrace for the relatives. Says the Gemara, no, it's not a proof. In Dechsiv, Adam Ein Tzadik Ba'aretz Asher Yaseh Tov Lo Yechta. Famous pasuk Shlomo Melech. There's nobody except for four, but there's nobody who lives and doesn't do an aveira. Everybody does something wrong, right? The Chumash is not embarrassed at all to tell us about the downfalls of our great leaders, right? So of course, everyone needs some kind of atonement. Okay, Tashma, another one. So V'saftu, this son of Yeravam, V'saftu lo kol Yisrael v'koveroso, and they buried him. Now, kapara. So the prophecy was that only his son, only Yeravam's son, is going to get a burial, but the rest of the relatives are not going to get a burial. Only he will get buried. Now, kapara, if burial is because of atonement, primarily because of atonement, hanach nami likfaru. The rest of the family, even though they didn't do the right thing, they were rishayim, but they should also get buried, so they can have an atonement. So maybe you see that the fact that they were not going to get buried is because of embarrassment, not because of kapara, because of disgrace. So we say, no, maybe it's really because of atonement, and Hashem wanted the tzaddik to get some form of atonement, but the other Rishayim, that's part of their punishment. Even after death, we're not burying you, and you won't get that atonement. Therefore, once again, maybe it's because of atonement. Hashma, the prophecy about the people of Anatot, of Yirmiyahu, that were evil, the prophecy was you're not going to get eulogized and you will not get buried. Lo yizlu v'lo yikfuru. So why not? The lo tahave lahu kapara. So that you should not get a kapara. Now, they were evil, so why not bury them and give them an atonement? So we say, so that was the original question. And we say, no, the lo tahave kapara. No, we don't want to have an atonement. So once again, we're going back and forth. Is the primary reason for atonement or for embarrassment? So that's burial. Now, ibailahu, another question. Hespeda, eulogizing. When we give eulogies to people, yikara dechai have or yikara deshachli have. So this is probably a similar idea. So literally it means, is it an honor? Yakar from the word honor. Is it an honor for the living, meaning the relatives are being honored with the eulogies and the praises of the person who died, or it's yikara deshachli? No, it's an honor for the dead person, that after death he's being eulogized, and then so now once again I assume obviously they're both true in a certain way, but what's the main impetus, the main motivation for the eulogies? Lamai nafkamina. First of all, what's the practical difference if it's for the honor of the living or the honor of the dead? So let's say the guy says the Amar Lotus Paduhu Lahu Gavra. This happens a lot in Israel. Very humble, great rabbis, they put in their will, please don't eulogize me, just bury me. So they don't want all the honor and all of this, just bury me. So the Amar Lotus Paduhu Lahu Gavra, if he says don't eulogize me, so now if it's for his own honor, he can forego on that. If it's the honor of his relatives, he can't forego on their honor. That's their honor. Inami lafuke miyorshin. Additionally to people used to pay for these eulogizers to come and really be ma'oror, awaken crying and sadness of the people. So who pays for that? Nowadays you would say, who pays for the funeral service? Do the Yorshim, do the inheritors have to pay? Well, if it's the honor of the dead, so it comes from his bank account. If it's the honor of the relatives, it'll come from their bank account. So yeah. So okay. So now, yeah. So now, Tashma. Now let's bring a bunch of proofs and see if we can come to a conclusion. Vayavo Avram lispo l'sara v'lifkosa. Avram Avinu went and he eulogized Sarah v'lifkosa. Now, it says there Vayavo. He came from somewhere. Simply understood, I think Rashi, the Ramban, they talk about from Akedas Yitzchak. But there was a certain period of time after she died, they waited for Avram Avinu to come to bury her. Now, the Armis Mishum Yikara Dechaya, if the eulogy is really for the honor of the living, so then Mishum Yikara Avram Mashal Sarah, because of the honor of Avram Avinu, they kept Sarah not buried, so you can come and bury her and give her a eulogy. Why? So says the Gemara, no. Sarah Gufa Nichala Kihech Demiyakir Avram. Good married couple. Yeah, Sarah wanted that Avram should be honored. So even maybe eulogy is really for the honor of the living, but Sarah wanted the honor of Avram to be there. So that's why there was a period of time where they waited to bury her until he came and he eulogized her. Okay. Tashma v'saftu lo kol Yisrael. So this is now the son of, back to the son of Yeravam. Yeah, or something. Yeah, son of Yeravam. So Tashma v'saftu lo kol Yisrael. The cover also, all the Jewish people eulogized him and buried him. Now, v'yarms mishum yikar dechai. If it's because the honor of the living, the eulogy is because the honor of the living. Who? So Hanach b'nei Yikara. So Hanach b'nei Yikaran and who? So what's the honor? It sounds like all the house of Yeravam were all Rishayim. Everyone that was left over in the house of Yeravam were Rishayim. So what are you honoring? You're honoring Rishayim. They're eulogizing him to honor. What's the honor over there? Why you on the one understanding is that you're honoring the living by letting them give a eulogy on the person who died. Mm-hmm. But here the leftover relatives were all Rishayim. So what honor are you giving Rishayim? Must be it's the honoring of the dead. It's for his own honor that they eulogized him. So says the Gemara, no. Tzaddikim want that there should be honor to their relatives. Sounds like even if the relatives are Rishayim, they still tzaddikim want that they should be honored with the tzaddik's death. Interesting. So, yeah, Tashma, another part of Tanakh. Okay, now we're still in Yirmiyahu. So this is a different story now. B'shalom Tamus u'v'misrav avasecha malachim harishonim asher hayu lefanecha kach yisrafu lach. V'hoy adon yisvedu lach yidavar ani dibarti num Hashem. So this is Yirmiyahu. Now who's he speaking to? Not the Bnei Anatos. Who's he speaking to here? He's talking to Tzidkiyahu. Okay, he's talking to Tzidkiyahu, and he's prophesizing about, I guess, his own death. No, about his death or about Tzidkiyahu's death? I don't remember. I think he's talking to Tzidkiyahu, saying what's going to happen to you. Yeah, about Tzidkiyahu. Yeah. Okay. Now the Iyamar Shumi Kar Dechayehu. So if he's telling Tzidkiyahu all these things are going to happen, you're going to die, and you're going to be eulogized, it's going to be a big funeral, it's going to be great. So the Iyamar Shumi Kar Dechayehu. So my naflamine. If it's all about the honor of the living, so what's he telling Tzidkiyahu all the beauty that's going to happen to him after he dies? So maybe it's because it's the honor of the dead, and therefore he's telling him that you'll get a good funeral. So no, hachi kamarle. He says like this: Liyakru beich Yisrael ki heichi demisyakir bavasach. The Jewish people are going to honor you the same way that your forefathers were honored. So he's It's also a nice thing to tell him that the Jewish people will be honored through you, through your funeral, the same way your forefathers were honored through the Jewish people's funeral. Okay, continuing, says in Tehillim, Tashma, it says, Tashma nivze be'einav nimas. Someone's going to be disgraced in his eyes, and it's going to be very disgusting. So who's that? Zeh Chizkiyahu melech Yehuda. Chizkiyahu, the king of Yehuda. So he was very righteous. However, his father was a big Rasha. And after his father passed away, not after he passed away when he was alive, after he passed away, what did he do? Shigir atzamos of it. He dragged the bones of his father al mita shel chavalim on a bed of ropes, and he dragged them through the streets, and he disgraced them that everyone should see what a Rasha he was. And Chizkiyahu, who was the king, is not allowed to really forego on his honor. So somehow that wasn't a problem. And about Kivud Avim, so Rashi asks, what's with Kivud Avim? You still have a mitzvah to honor your parents even after they're dead. That Rashi says it's only a mitzvah of a parent who was considered part of the Jewish people. When you are such a Rasha, you lose your status of someone who deserves honor even from your son. So therefore, there was no problem of him to do it. Now, v'mishum yikari dechayu. So if after death the eulogies and the way you treat is for the honor of the living, so if that's true, then mai taima. Like, what did he do this whole thing for? It sounds like he did this whole thing that his father should get a kapara. He should get an atonement, and that's why he did it. Mai taima ki heichi the tehavele kapara lavua. Really, he did it that his father should have an atonement by dragging him through the streets. He should be really atoned. Says the Gemara, umishum kapara davua mashu leili kardi Yisrael. So because the atonement of the father, we're going to push off the honor of the Jewish people by giving him I guess by pushing off the funeral, by pushing off the burial. If it's all because of the honor of somebody else, so then why are you pushing it off? That's interesting. I don't know. He's a Rasha, so like, why do we care so much by pushing it off? By Sarah, we care. You don't push it off. You don't push off burial and a funeral because it's Sarah. But by Chizkiyahu's father, so okay, that's interesting. Like, why do we care? Why you're pushing it off? Yeah, okay. So we say no. Yisrael Gufayu, the Jews themselves, Nichalahu demichli karayu legabe. The Jews themselves, it's good for them. It's pleasing for them that demichli karayu legabe. They'll forego on their honor in order that Chizkiyahu should teach them a lesson by dragging his father through the streets. So once again, we're not sure, is it the honor of the death, is the honor of the dead person, or the honor of everybody else? Why we bury, why we eulogize. Okay. Tashma, Amr Lahen. Okay, so now we're switching from Tanakh to Rabbeinu HaKadosh, the one who compiled the Mishnayos. So in his, apparently we're only having a short version over here. In Ksubas it's much more. But he has a whole will at the end. What do you want after he dies? So one thing he says is Amr Lehen Al Tispeduni Ba'yaros. He says, don't eulogize me when you're bringing me from place to place. When you're bringing my coffin from place to place. He died in a town of Tzipori, and he's going to be buried in a place called Beis Sharim. So don't eulogize me in the small towns. Rather, wait till you get to the big city, and in the big city, I want everyone to gather together. I want all of them to eulogize me. Make it a big, big, nice funeral. So now, the Yamris Ikari Dechai, if eulogizing is because honoring the alive people, meaning honoring the living, the ones who are, it's their honor. So like, why does he care? My nafklim, right? If it's for your own honor, so then you want to have a nice funeral. A lot of people, that's fine. If it's for the honor of the rest of the people, the rest of the Jewish people, so then why do you care how big it should be? So he says no, because Savar, really maybe it's because of the honor of the living, and the reason he cares about such a nice funeral is Liskaru Be Yisrael Tvei. It's more of an honor of the Jewish people when they're all together. Right? When the head of the Jewish people dies, right, there's a certain honor that has happened in Israel. Right? 2 years ago, Rav Chaim Kanievsky died. There's a beautiful honor when you have 600, 700,000 people rushing to go. It's not only an honor for the dead, but it's honor for the living. They're showing honor, right? It's when you show honor to others, there's a certain honor for yourself also. So, okay. So still not undecided about our question. Tashma, it says in our Mishnah, so Halinu, that you push off burying the person for lichvodo, simply understood, to honor him. Lahavilo aram etachichin. You can push off burying when you want to bring the person his coffin and his shrouds. So in that case, ain't no overlove. Then you haven't violated the prohibition of delaying burial. So now, ma'ilav lichvodo shel meis. Is it not because of the honor of the dead person? Meaning that when it says lichvodo in the Mishnah, you're honoring the dead person by pushing off the burial, by bringing him his coffin and his shrouds. So you see that the honor is really for the dead person, not for the people who are living. Says the Gemara, it's not a proof. Why? Look, lichvodo shel chai. It could really be the honor of the living. So says the Gemara, umishum kvodo shel chai. Umishum kvodo shel chai. Umishum kvodo shel chai. Mavis lemeis. I guess it means maybe says that okay, we push off because of the honor of the living, we push off the burial of the dead person. How does that make sense? Says the Gemara, no, it does make sense. Because of the honor of the living, you could push off the burial of the dead person. Really? Where do you find such a thing? Ki amar Rachmana, when the Torah says, Lo salam nivlaso ala eight, you should not leave over the carcass, the corpse, on the tree, on the wood. So what do you see from there? Dumya de talui, meaning rather you should bury him right away. But we're comparing someone who's left on the tree to a person who should be buried right away. So dumya de talui de isbe bezayim. So it has to be similar to the one who's being hanged. That it'll be a disgrace to leave him on the tree. Aval hacha kaven the last be bezayim lo. Pushing off a dead person doesn't cause a disgrace. The disgrace is when you leave a dead person hanging on a tree. That's disgraceful. But here, it's not disgraceful. So therefore, even for the honor of the living, you can push off and not bury the dead, and it's not considered a disgrace. Okay. Once again, Tashma, Halinu Lichvodo. So it says, we had this earlier, yeah? You can push off for the honor of the dead person. Lishama alav ayaros. People should hear about the funeral, about the death. Lahavilo mekonenos. People should bring their certain instruments that help a person wail. The lamenting women would come. Okay, all to arouse. That's one of the goals of a eulogy is to arouse the crowd about the death of the person. So, lahavilo mekodenos, lahavilo aron etachrichin, to bring them the coffin and the shrouds. So, ain't overlove. You're not violating anything. You're not violating, not burying him because it's all seemingly for his honor. Shekola osa eino el lichvodo. Everything you're doing is only for the honor of the mace. Lichvodo shal mace. Pretty clear over here. The Brisa says you're honoring the dead person, not honoring the living. You're honoring the dead. Says the Gemara, no, I can still get out of it. What it means to say is, anybody who does these things for the honor of the living, it's not going to be a disgrace of the dead person. So it didn't mean to say it's only for the honor of the dead. What it means to say is, if you do it for the honor of the living, it won't be disgraceful to the dead. Okay, still unanswered. Tashma Rabbi Nosson Omer Siman Yafa L'Meis. It's a good sign for the dead person. Shenefrayin Mimenu L'Achar Misa. It's good for the mace. Shenefrayin Mimenu L'Achar Misa. I guess there's a certain retribution, meaning, I guess the burial, that's good for him. So, sorry, mace Shalom Nispad, below Nikbar, or Shechaya Gararto, O Shaya Yishamim Mizalfin Amitaso. So, Zehu Simin Yafa Lemes. Okay, 1 second. So Rabbi Nosson says it's a good sign for the dead person. Shenefran Mimenu L'Achar Misa. That sounds like what? He still gets punished after his death?
Good omen for
To what?
retribution is exacted from him
After, for example, when he doesn't get eulogized, doesn't get buried, an animal eats him, drags him, devours him, or the rain goes and falls on the coffin, and therefore it dissolves the body. So zeu simin yafa lemes shma mina. So what do you see from there? Yikar de shachvihu shma mina. Sounds like it's all for the honor of the dead, for the honor of the dead. So therefore, we found a conclusion that really these things are all done to honor the dead. Because if not, so then if it's not for the honor of the dead, so what happens? Why does all these disgraceful things do anything for him? Not getting buried, getting eaten, getting the rainfall on you, must be that it's an honor for the dead. Shema mina. Okay. Now we mentioned that when you bury someone who has the capital punishment came to him, you don't bury him next to a tzaddik, right? You're going to have two cemeteries, one for the niskalon and nisrafin, for the stoning and the burning ones, and one for the hereg v'chenek. But you don't bury him next to the righteous until the body gets disintegrates. Then you take the bones, and then you go and bury the bones next to their father. So,
don't let me interrupt.
Welcome back. Too late. So, so let's see. V'kol kach lama. What's all this for? Lefi she'ein kover in Russia etzel tzaddik. You shouldn't bury a wicked person next to a tzaddik. This is right. South Africa. That's what you told me, right? They bury them on the outside. Yeah. The Omar of Achabar Chanina Minayin she'ein kover in Russia etzel tzaddik. How do I know that I don't bury Russia etzel tzaddik? Shenamar vayhi heim komrim vayhi heim kovrim. So this is by Malachim. They're going to bury Ish v'hinei ro es hakadud. Oh, so this is a whole interesting story. Okay, so they're going to go bury somebody. Then they saw a whole legion, the enemy, the army coming, and they took this person. Vayashlicheu es ha'ish bekever Elisha, and lo and behold, they threw him in the grave of Elisha. Elisha, the great person. And says the verse, amazing thing. Vayelech vayiga ha'ish ba'atzomos Elisha. He went down. He ended up coming in contact with the bones of Elisha, and Hashem brought him back to life. Vayichi vayakum al raglov, and he brought him back to life. Why? Because you can't have a Russia being buried next to a tzaddik. Yeah. Not only do you see it from here, but in general, the commentaries always speak out. Hashem does not like to change the order of the world. He likes to keep the world in its natural state. Mm-hmm. Making him do miracles is not something which is the Gemara says it's called being burdening him, so to speak. But it's interesting, for such a thing to not be buried next to a tzaddik, he'll change the nature of the world. It's amazing thing to bring someone back to life. Okay. So now, Amar Le Rav Papa, maybe there's no proof from here that it was because he didn't want a righteous person to be buried next to an evil person, but rather for another reason. Maybe to fulfill the following prophecy. Elisha wanted double portion of what his Rabbi Eliyahu got. Eliyahu got to revive one person from the dead. Elisha also revived one person from the dead, but he wanted a double portion. He wanted to revive two people to be more than his Rebbe. Yeah. So, Vayihi na pishnayim Baruch Elai. So maybe that's why Hashem revived him, to fulfill this prophecy, this nice thing for him. Amar le ihachi hainu detanya Al raglav amud ulebeisa lo halach. So the problem was the guy got up and walked, and then once he was away, and then he died. So that's not really called reviving somebody. That's like a temporary revival. So that wouldn't be a fulfillment of that prophecy. So okay, but Elohina Pishtaim Hekim Shakaslo. Where do you find that this was fulfilled? That Eliyahu got double the amount of Elisha got double the amount of Eliyahu. So Amarle Rabbi Yochanan Sharipa Tzaraas Naaman Shehi Shkula Kimes. We know Gemara and Adarim. The Gemara and Adarim says that 4 people are considered like dead. One of them is Tzaras. Someone has Tzaras is considered as if he's dead. Elisha went and healed somebody from Tzaras. That's like reviving somebody from the dead. And that now he has 2. Eliyahu had 1. Okay. Dichsiv al nati kemes, as the verse says in Tamidbar, al nati kemes asher b'tetzol mirechem imo v'yechel chatzi besor. So don't be like a dead person. And there it's in the context there it's referring to Tzaras and calling them a mace. Okay. Yeah. So now, why do you only establish 2 cemeteries? One for the top 2 capital punishments and one for the bottom 2 capital punishments. Says the Gemara, "V'liskan arba kvuros." You should make. Sorry, I skipped. I skipped. Ukashem she'ein koven rasha etel tzadik, kach ein koven rasha chomer etel rasha kal. The same way you don't bury a rasha chomer. So what's a rasha chomer? Someone who gets a skila and streifa, stoning and burning. He's a rasha chomer. Meaning, if you're going to be a rasha, don't be rasha chomer. Yeah, that's a great, very intense rasha. That's the worst rasha. We can't bury him next to someone who got only strangulation or got killed by the sword. It's still not honorable. In the same way a rasha to a tzaddik, you understand? So to the worst rasha, not next to, the blue crime versus the white crime, whatever. This guy stole, this guy was a mass murderer. No. So we don't put yeah. Okay, here's a little difference. It's not a robber. It's also a, but yeah. So why do you make 4? Liskin arba kuros, shnei kuros, gemar gemirila. That's what Hashem told Moshe at Har Sinai. 2, not 4. Kacha. Okay. Amar ulam Rabbi Yochanan achal chele vehifresh korban. Okay, now a little bit of a new topic, but it's going to come back to Avelis. Says in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, a person ate chelev. Chelev are the fats that you're not allowed to eat. And what happened? He realized, I made a mistake. The hifresh korban. And now he went to bring a korban. And what happened? The Hamer Daito. He became a mummer, someone who threw off Judaism, went and said, I'm not doing this anymore. Now the Chazarbo, he was inspired, so he came back to Judaism. What happens to the korban? There's something called dichui by korbanos. Once it gets a blemish, so it's not always can you just come back and bring it. So what happens now? Do you say hoel v'nitcha yidacha? Since it was pushed off, meaning when a guy threw off his Judaism, he was a mummer, at that state, you are not allowed to bring a korban. So you had a period of time when you brought a korban, which is fine. Then you had a state that you threw off your Judaism, you're not allowed to bring a korban. So it was pushed off the korban. Now you come back and you want to know, once it was pushed off, is it pushed off forever? Or no, it's not pushed off forever. Just because it was pushed off for a period of time, you could still bring it. So, what happens if you ate chalev and then you brought a korban? You separated an animal to be brought as a korban, and then you became deranged. You lost your mind, and then what happened? Because of nishtapeh, but Baruch Hashem, you took some good medicine and you healed and you came back. What do you say over there? It says there hoven v'nitchayidacha. There too, it sounds like once it was pushed off because you can't bring a korban when you're deranged, so it's pushed off forever. Says the Gemara, I need both of these cases. The first one, you pushed off with your own hands. You became and you went off and you threw away your Judaism. Aval hai, it wasn't you. Hashem gave you all of a sudden, he made you deranged. What could you do? So Ema, that's like someone who's sleeping. When you're sleeping, you also can't bring a korban. But we don't say the next morning you can't bring it again, right? So Yashin is also a period of time where you can't bring a korban. But that's fine. So maybe deranged would be like that. The iyashmin and hacha, maybe if you only had the case where you were deranged, mishum de'ein biyado laksor, there you can't come back. Therefore, we say it's pushed off forever. Aval Hasam to Biyad Laxar. There you see, here you see, you can always come back. Even the guy throws off his whole Judaism, it's Biyad Laxar. It's in your hands to come back. No such thing as no point of return. You have Aval Hasam to Biyad Laxar, Emalo Tzricha. Therefore, you have both of these. You have both of these halachas that are taught that you push off the korban. Once it's pushed off forever. Amar Rabbi Yosef Af Ananami Tanina. We also taught the following: Hayaba Kachim. So now you have a ir nidachas, which the people get killed, and also the spoils get destroyed. Now, what happens if you had certain animals or certain things that were going to be donated to hektish? So what do you do with them now? So hayuba kachim. So hayuba kachim is beach. Yamusu. You have to kill them. You can't bring the animals as a korban. Kache bedek kabayis. Different things that were going to be donated to the temple treasury. There you have to redeem them. You can't donate them anymore. The Havinan Ba, we ask on this halacha, Amaya Musu, why have to kill the animal? Kavan de Iktil, Havaluhu Kapara. Kavan de Iktil, Havaluhu Kapara. Meaning once you, sorry. Yeah, sorry, thank you. Once the owner's being killed, that's an atonement. Here, the explicit Gemara says that when someone gets killed, they get an atonement for their bad actions. Now what happens? Once they're atoned, they're no longer a rasha. Once they're no longer a rasha, you can bring the animal as a korban. So even though when they were a rasha, you couldn't bring it, but now they're no longer a rasha. Is it not because you say, once it's pushed off forever? So that should be a good proof that once it's pushed off, it's always pushed off, even though the guy now is no longer considered a rasha.